What employers are telling us is that the types of skills we're measuring on our current standardized testing system are not the skills that the students need to succeed in the jobs of the future and even the jobs of today. And I think as we build these programs like the new advanced technology framework, kids are learning skills that could enable them to go into multiple sectors. It's not even just about going into semiconductors. They're learning how to think critically, how to work as part of a team, how to solve a problem. And those are the skills that employers are looking for in the future workforce.
It's important to be part of a union because you have to have a voice.
Welcome to Union Talk. I'm Randi Weingarten.
So welcome to Union Talk. This is our last Union Talk of this calendar year. So I just want to say to everyone who's listening, have a wonderful holiday. And I hope next year there is more light than darkness for all of our listeners. This year, we've done and talked a lot about the campaign the AFT launched called Real Solutions for Kids and Communities. Now, that's a nice little soundbite, but what it does is more important than the soundbite, which is that we know in schools, teachers, bus drivers, guidance counselors, school-related personnel, they are doing a lot to try to deal with all of not only the effects of COVID, but all the effects of the divisiveness in the country, the economic issues in the country. Basically, educators do it all. And NYSUT, the NYSUT president is one of our guests today. They have a campaign going on in NYSUT about how, public schools unite us. And they do unite us, and they do also do a lot to help kids. And it's amazing what they do every single day, public schools and educators. But they can't do it alone. And they need strategies that, the world helps them with to actually advance agendas of a better life for people, a better life for kids, opportunity for kids, a better life for families. So what we said was, let us tackle the things that educators are telling us all the time: literacy issues, learning loss, loneliness, the effects of COVID, the effects of this division. And we need to tackle them in a positive, proactive way. So as others attempt to ban books, we give books out. As they, basically do drill and kill in schools, we say, no, we have to have the science of reading, but we have to have people really know what to do about it. Loneliness. We really believe in having things like community schools and wraparound services so we actually can meet the needs. And we're taking on the social media companies so that the algorithm is not the be all and the end all. What parents and kids need is the be all and the end all. And working with teachers, Michael Mulgrew has done a huge push on class size and lowering class size so that we can meet the needs of kids. But on the issue of learning loss and academics and well-rounded education, one of the issues that the three of us are about to talk about, my two guests, Michael Mulgrew, the president of the UFT, and Melinda Person, the president of NYSUT, there's something we really love, which is career tech ed and experiential learning. And how do we start creating these pipelines, these career-connected learning environments, starting from middle school and high school on? How do we do this work and do it in a systemic, real way so every kid in America has these opportunities, not just to have tests in schools, but actually have project-based learning and real-life experiences? And what we're seeing is that when we do this, and we do this in terms of CTE, and both Michael is a career tech ed teacher. I taught in a career tech ed school. But what we're seeing is it creates and meets, and passion meets purpose. And my favorite stat is that 94% of students in these career tech ed programs graduate from high school and 72% go on to post-secondary study. The question really becomes, how do we do this more and how we would make this the norm, not the exception. How do we destigmatize, and how do we really create these kind of pipelines and workforce development so that our kids are prepared for the jobs of today and tomorrow? And we're also prepared, and our kids are prepared for critical thinking, for application in this huge world of AI. So instead of memorization, it's application, it's critical thinking, it's communication, career tech ed, experiential learning, does all of this. I could go on and on and on. But what happened this month is that we had a real breakthrough. And that's a lot because of my two guests, which is that Micron, which is about to build a huge facility in the Syracuse, New York area. Micron and Michael and Melinda and I, with Governor Hochul, announced Pathway program with 10 school districts in New York State, from Niagara Falls and Watertown to New York City, as well as the school districts around Syracuse, about how to create a pathway for technical jobs in the chip industry, for jobs from engineering to technician, and how to do that. And guess what? The original framework was written by a school teacher in the Brooklyn School STEAM School. That is who our members are. That kind of ingenuity, that kind of amazing work. And these two leaders have done this work to help create this kind of advanced technology framework, the first of its kind in the nation. So with that, I want to just introduce Michael Mulgrew, the president of UFT, and Melinda Person, the president of NICET, two amazing warriors for public education, and welcome to Union Talk.
Thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Randy.
So you can tell how excited I am about the program, but, I'm sure there's a bunch of people who say, I thought high school was about going to college. And, what is vocational education? And isn't that just, why should we be doing this? And, why does this kind of education get a bad rap? And why are we trying to change that stereotype? And how do we debunk it?
All right. So first, it's still a battle I've been involved with for over 20 years, when we basically said no more vocational education. We need to do career and technical education. And so we knew what that was. It was a small group of educators understood the difference. What we were saying is that we want our children to do all the academics that all other children do, but we want to also then start contextualizing academics into whatever program of study the child is actually interested in. And those would be, you can think of your traditional vocational schools that people think about, but it was more about, it has to be modern, it has to be relevant, and we have to work with an industry partner, and we want to make sure that every program actually has a higher ed partner to partner with. So for 20 years, we've been fighting this battle about the stigmatism around this, but it's not based on any factual reality. I mean, these are students and programs that are at a very high level. They go from all sorts of engineering programs, medical technology programs, high-end hospitality and tourism programs, where each, students are taught how to run entire restaurants, back of the house, front of the house, all of these things. But a lot of it, and I'm just going to be blunt about it, a lot of this prejudice against these programs is from the education world.
Yep.
It is not from our society and our communities. Our communities want these programs. So, yeah, there's a group of educators, who believe that high school education is only supposed to be about preparing a kid for college. Well, the thing is that when you make it just about that, they don't do as well. And the numbers are there to bear that out. It's not even close. So 2 years ago, Randy, when you asked me to co-chair a task force on, recruitment and retention of teachers or school personnel, we were allowed to actually look at and survey and start digging down and doing focus group with students. We wanted to see what the students wanted out of their educational experience, as well as what teachers were trying to do out of their professional experience. And lo and behold, both of them came back with the exact same thing, which we were not expecting. They both said whatever they want, whatever they're doing, they want it to be relevant to their lives.
Yep.
So to me, that's where, and I keep pounding that, but we still have people who do believe that K-12 education is only should be about getting kids to college. So I say, all right, fine, I'll give you that argument. But there's one problem. The kids who are in strictly academic programs go to college at a much lower rate than the kids in the CTE programs.
Yeah.
So if that's your goal, you should be working with us. And you're the folks who are actually perpetrating the stigmatism around career and tech ed. So,
And I would add to that if you could see some of the programs that we have operating around the state of New York, kids are programming drones, for commercial applications. They're designing lighting systems for stage productions. They're installing solar panels. I mean, it is unbelievable. The coding of robots. It is not at all what you would think of when you think of vocational education. There is amazing stuff that's happening in our public schools today. And it's the kind of stuff that makes kids want to come to school and keeps them engaged in their own learning and makes them happy. I mean, the joy that you see in a CTE classroom is contagious. And so more of that for sure.
And that, I want to just dwell on that for a second, Melinda, because we hear so many people talk about, and we see it ourselves, COVID actually, the statistics from the last PISA report were misunderstood. It's not how long schools were closed or not closed. It's that society closed down from March 2020 for several months. And that's what disconnected the connection between schools and kids and families. And there's still high levels of kids not coming to school. And and if you look at these programs, kids are excited about being there. I mean, we were all at the Edison program and watching and talking to kids who were talking about, what was going on in their classrooms and excited about their classrooms. And we saw a UN debate, a social studies debate in an Edison career tech ed school, that was such higher order debate skills.
yeah.
So, the debunking of this, because this brings kids to school. And I suspect that the more people would see what's going on in these CTE schools, the more they'd see that this is what you just said, Melinda, that kind of joy and passion gets kids to wake up early in the morning and want to be in school.
Yeah.
There was a young man that I met when I was in Chittenango when we were out in central New York he's a senior in the robotics club there. And he told me, in his freshman year that he was in danger of dropping out. He was in all special ed classes and didn't know what he was going to do. He found robotics, fell in love with it, and he now has a full ride to RIT in the fall. This kind of learning taps into kids who might not thrive in a traditional, rigorous academic, narrow environment. And he was so excited to tell me about the possibilities for his future. So I can't say enough about how good this is for kids.
Yeah. And for me, the issue is, what are we doing to challenge ourselves as a profession or as an industry, however you want to think about it? We are, teachers are very dogmatic, I guess is right, where we believe that what we've been teaching should be the only thing we should continue to teach. And that's not, we have to revamp everything and look at it differently, because students are going to live in a world that was much different than ours.
Right.
And they're going to have to be able to thrive in a world that was much different than the one we entered as young adults. So, it's just like everyone has to really take a mirror and take a look at it and say, all right, what do we need to be teaching? What academics do we need to be teaching? And we have students with the AI stuff. And even before that, they're like, why are you teaching me all this? And they just go on their phones and they're like, here, you want this information? I'll give it to you. And we have to be able to deal with that and be honest about it. Just as, with higher education, they got to be able to deal with it also. The educational institutions tend to move very slowly, but the world is not moving slowly at all. And it's moving faster and faster than ever. And our students know that, which is sometimes they look at us like we're crazy. So it really becomes more, for us, we know the positive effects. If people want data, we'll give them tons of the data. It's all there. There's nothing you can do to argue about this. it's working, and it's working well, and children are more happy, and they're more engaged with their own education. They're more engaged with their decisions in their own lives. Teachers are happier when when they're doing this. It's all there. So it really becomes a challenge about uh, how do we look at ourselves, and then we can talk about outside industries and workforce development and economic development and all of those things. But we really got to take that the CTE community has always felt that we don't get much help, but just leave us alone. And that's not the way it should be.
And in fact, spoiler alert here, we are having one of these. We do every year we have a big educational professional development conference in New York City, normally when it's freezing and normally when it snows. And it's done by the AFT professional development arm and by the UFT teacher centers. And this year, it's all about CTE and creating these connections. And it's oversubscribed. And we have lots of teams from lots of different places in the United States coming. And so hopefully, but I think you're right, Michael. I think that how we shift the way educators, frankly, I would say administrators, since they all went to college to be in their jobs, how do we shift their views so that the aperture for what we're doing K-12 is just broader than what it's been for the last 10 or 20 years. And you say this a lot, Melinda, it can't just be test, 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 test. And so this kind of broadens the aperture so that it's aligned with what the skills that kids need in the future are going to be, which is AI, critical thinking, communication, relationship building. So let me hear kind of from both of you, what do you think about what we need to do given everything that's going on in terms of AI?
I think part of what we have to do is, and you mentioned testing, I think this is an important part of this. What employers are telling us is that the types of skills we're measuring on our current standardized testing system are not the skills that the students need to succeed in the jobs of the future and even the jobs of today. And I think as we build these programs like the new advanced technology framework, kids are learning skills that could enable them to go into multiple sectors. It's not even just about going into semiconductors. They're learning how to think critically, how to work as part of a team, how to solve a problem. And those are the skills that employers are looking for in the future workforce. They most definitely don't need people to memorize facts. They want kids who can look at a problem and then go do the work to solve it.
Yeah. And so we have a couple of pieces here. One is, let's talk about, again, our profession. How do you train the next generation of teachers to use an experiential learning instructional methodology versus traditional instructional methodologies, right? So how are we going to prepare our own workforce when we're talking about helping other workforces get prepared? So we have to take a look at that, because that has to change. And how are we going to change it, since everyone who's preparing teachers hasn't done that? So that's one piece. Then the next piece really gets down into the fact that when we are setting up a new program, when an industry comes to us, or it could be anything, it could be a partners who, there's a nursing shortage, there's an engineering shortage. We have most of the skill sets in the future world will be all technical based, technician based. When they come to us, it's the first thing that when we sit with as a group of teachers and try to work these things out. It's like, first, what do you need them to do? And then we always ask, what college degrees are needed. And it's almost always, unless there's some sort of regulation at a state or federal level, they're like, we don't care. We need them to be able to perform the skill sets that we need for our profession. They're like, if they go to college and get a degree, we have to retrain them anyway. It's just like when we deal with Micron, right? So here was the Micron piece. They're like, look, everyone at first thought that it was all about top engineering skills, which are necessary in that industry. But then when the teachers started meeting with the HR departments of Micron, and they started asking about all the different titles and types of jobs that they have, it turned out that less than 3% of that workforce are high-end engineering people. And even those folks, they have to get retrained by the industry. And then it was like, what are all these other jobs that no one ever talks about? And that's how we started building that framework. And then for students, it's like, if you want to do this, and they do, they get engaged and we move them forward. But it's really this, why are you telling kids that tell them they have to go get a college degree, spend all that money, go into debt, when industry is telling us we don't care?
So for anybody who's listening, the people who are on this podcast today are educators. We've all been classroom educators. We're all now the heads of our respective unions. And if you listen to us, we're talking about kids and their futures in this kind of practical detail about what we need to do in a way that, frankly, I've never heard people from departments of labor do. And so the question becomes, and Michael, I saw you, when we were at Edison and we saw all those Skills USA certificates.
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit just about, the practical reality of how, because you said this earlier and I was struck by it, that the CTE people just say, okay, leave us alone, we'll do it ourselves. But talk about the importance of this Skills USA competition and the Skills USA accreditation and how that can be a real kind of glue around the country and what it is and what you do and how you're engaged in it. And just give us a little tutorial on Skills USA.
I'll go quick. It's a national organization, but it was a vocational organization at one point, and then it changed, and that's when they changed their name to Skills, sort of like vocational became career and tech ed, but it's not the same. It just says it's not the same for Skills. Skills is the one thing that the education community that does this work knows very well. Skills designs top-level competitions, but they're designed by the industries. They're not designed by the educators. And there's hundreds of different skills competitions, and it's not just you could be about digital digital wiring and construction and all these other things. That's inside of that, and they have a competition for that. But they also have they have competitions about how your marketing strategy around your businesses. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But it's all designed by industry. So if you really want to know what industry needs, you just need to go to these competitions and not, have a debate in Washington or at a university about what you think they need. But the fact is that industry goes there because they know it's received well. And they're not running up against, a brick wall, which is their frustration when they try to deal with a regular educational institution. But what Skills does is actually really then allows the school programs, when they see every year, anyone involved in, say, computer diagnostics or computer tech, they see that the competition will change. The type of what they're asking the competitors to do changes on a yearly basis. They then know they have to adjust their programs. See, so it's this beautiful symmetry that's set up like, all right, so this industry is moving over here to this new phase of this industry that we weren't teaching, but we see this in the competition. So we now have to change our curriculum or our program itself. And they just do that automatically. Why? Because the schools are involved with Skills. And of course, it's a competition. They want to win. But it really comes down to it's a way for them to reflect and look at their own programs to constantly keep them up to date. So in a very strange way, these are probably the most up-to-date programs being offered anywhere in the United States of America in terms of actual relevance to workforce and for you to be able to make a living.
It's amazing to watch. And, as I said, this year, I really want to go to one of these Skills USA competitions, but it's just in every one of these real intensive CTE schools, you see these banners hanging out all over, about where the school placed in terms of the competition. So it's kind of like CTE football. It feels like, and where Edison is like Alabama.
Edison is top-notch skills performing
Yeah.
schools in the country. Yeah.
So, we're not gonna get into, Melinda, your and my, and as I see, we're all wearing red today. Our cherished institution and where they place Cornell, where they place in football. So we'll
Well,
talk about
skills is red
Alabama.
too. Let's
Yeah.
be clear. Skills is red too.
Oh, I love that. So, Melinda, when we were starting to talk about Micron, so like in 1 week we had this deal with Micron, the FLCIO then had a deal with Microsoft. But when we were talking about this in terms of where to place this framework and where to have this pilot, you were the one who said, let's not just do the Syracuse area. As important as that is, and the Syracuse area made sense, and all those districts, because of our union colleagues there, are working on this in an enormous, wonderful way. And a lot of that, frankly, is your leadership. But you said, let's also go, not just to New York City, but let's go to Watertown, let's go to Niagara Falls. Would you unpack that decision a bit for us and talk about the whys?
Sure. So the way that we have sort of historically thought about workforce development is the company comes in and then we try to build up the workforce in the location where the company is. So it would make sense that we would be investing around Syracuse because of Micron moving into Clay. But if you look at some other small upstate cities where a lot of the industry has moved out, they are still producing smart kids, right, with a lot of potential. And so the idea here is, can we bring this advanced technology curriculum to these upstate small cities and then use this well-trained workforce to attract industry back into upstate New York's small cities? And so it's sort of this reverse uh, process where the companies will go to where the workforce has been created for them. That's the idea. I think there's also a huge amount of potential because these two particular districts, Niagara Falls and Watertown, they already have experience doing CTE programs, and they already have their students out in industry in the community. Coming into these small cities will actually help the governor and others who do economic development upstate bring industry back to upstate New York.
Right. That'd be great.
I'm going to jump in on that because this is one of our other frustrations is as we've done this work and we have proven, the teachers and the students have proven that they can all be very successful in different industries. The next horizon for us to challenge is the fact that this entire education, workforce development, economic development programs across the United States are completely not in alignment. And they've done things, and this is not just about New York State. This is across the board. Economic development does their own thing over here. Workforce development does their own thing, usually in, 2-year colleges and some other small programs for adult retraining and stuff like that. And then you only have the Perkins money, which is for K through 12. This is the most ineffective and makes no sense type of system for us to have as taxpayers, just as a basic taxpayer. Because it should all be in alignment. It shouldn't be like, all right, I live in a specific area, so I was lucky enough to get some money from someone. It should be, we're aligning programs for industries. Hopefully they're in the state, but they don't have to be in your state. But we're aligning these programs for industries, and we're challenging our K to 12. Basically, it could be middle school to 12th grade, 6 to 12, to you to start, develop the programs with the industry and start doing that. But at the same time, that should be combined with the workforce development plan of the state, as well as with the economic development plan of the state. So right now you have, all right, a school system wants to do a program over here on hospitality and tourism because there may be a need somewhere in the state, so the school does it. That doesn't mean the workforce development money has anything to do with it. It won't have anything to do with it. But are they doing anything to help support that, to move the whole economic and workforce development of the state? The answer is no, they're not. because each one of these three pots of federal money and three different programs that a state has to have is in a complete silo.
Yeah.
And let's be blunt. When you're talking about decades of this is the way things were done, how do those silos take it when you say, you know what, we're going to have to change and you got to change along with us? They say yes at first, and then they dig in and nobody wants to change. But that's a real challenge, because that's exactly what Melinda was talking about. It shouldn't matter whether you're how small your school district is. You should be able to participate in a statewide, completely supported system of helping your children be able to be part of this process. And it shouldn't be like, oh, well, you're kind of really small, so we don't, we're not going to send any workforce or economic development money your way.
I think that, what you're raising, Michael, here about that alignment is probably that plus, what we're doing to help kids. Those two things are probably the most important pieces out of this conversation, because I remember you and I, Michael, were in, and I have two more questions for both of you. The last question, of course, is going to be, what teacher has the biggest impact on you? That's the last question I always ask every guest on this podcast. But you and I were at a meeting last December. It was one of the last meetings that Secretary Walsh had.
Mm-hmm.
And from the outside world, people would have said, oh, yeah, it's just another bureaucratic meeting that government has. But it was seismic, because it was the first time that the Department of Labor said, we are going to vitiate, we're going to end this line between workforce development that we do out of school and workforce development in school. And that we're just going to be able to say, we as the Labor Department should be doing both of these things. And then in terms of K-12 through higher ed, the whole notion that we're saying that this workforce development, these skills and knowledge that are needed, they should start in junior high school and in high school. It shouldn't just be one day of let's bring in people from different careers so that you could see it. And the fact that we have had to intentionally talk about this stuff as a way of starting to seed alignment is part of the work that the three of us are doing. And it's hard work. And we kind of sometimes hit against brick walls, but I'm so grateful for the two of you to want to kind of get rid of those brick walls. So it's, so that brings me to my penultimate question, which is, what do you see for this next calendar year and school year for career tech ed and experiential learning in New York? You're both amazing national leaders, but your field that you work in all the time is New York. So what do you see as the future for next year? And then I'll ask you my last question that I love asking everybody.
I would say I would love to see us grow programs in health science careers. The staffing shortages in the healthcare industry are just off the charts. And this is something where we can really play a big part, I believe, in addressing a state crisis, a national crisis. And I know Michael's been working on this in New York City, but I think there's more we can do around the state as well.
Fantastic.
I'm looking to see where we can start getting people looking at when we approach, because we're always the advocates, that we're not a problem. We're actually trying to figure things out and get things done. The regulations that have been around for 40 years probably are not, some might still be necessary, some might not. Melinda's right about healthcare. It's in a crisis, and we're trying to figure out a different model. That's going to require a lot of changes in state and local regulations for us to get it done. But we've been asked to try to figure this out because of the crisis itself. But it's more of an understanding. And basically, I just want to keep building a stronger community that we finally really see some wind in our sails about pushing everyone. Because you're right, whenever we try to change what's there, I'll try to be nice about the way I put it. It's, literally we're grabbing people and dragging them, kicking and screaming. And that's at every level of government. every level of government. And then when you get involved with the industries, they like to move fast, but you got to watch them too. They got their own ways of doing things. So it's sort of like we're at the we're basically the center where we're trying to get everyone. We listen to what people are frustrated about everywhere. We're trying to get them together, but we got to keep building that community of folks who get this and keep trying to move it, and just keep doing our work and keeping our quality up. People are going to be looking around the country about what we do this summer. We already have 10 school districts involved, but we're going to be training a lot of teachers on it, on what all the work that we just did on our framework that we announced. So there's quite a few things to do, but I think it's really about keep pushing the boundaries of breaking the silos.
Fantastic. So my last question of the last podcast of the year, which is, what teacher has had the biggest impact? We're all teachers. We all run unions that are full of teachers, and we've all had teachers. So what teacher had the biggest impact on you?
That's easy for me. Mrs. McKee, my second grade teacher, she figured out I couldn't read phonetically. And she went into the back closet where she had her old flashcards and asked my mother to come in. And she just opened up the world of reading to me and changed my life. And I'm a voracious reader till this day just because of Mrs. McKee.
Aw, love that.
I would say Mr. Milligan, my 11th grade U.S. history teacher. He taught me so much about labor unions, about educational inequality. But I think the thing he taught me that sort of has persisted throughout my whole life is to always question why you believe what you believe. And so I hear his voice sometimes in my head when I think about what is my position on this and why is that my position. So he's a great educator to this day. I'm retired now, but still calls me up occasionally to let me know what he thinks about an issue.
And it was great to see him when you were elected as the president of NICET. It was great to see him in the audience. It was really touching and moving that he was there. I mean, I remember when I was elected as the president of the AFT, I had Mr. Dillon was in the audience for me, who was my AP humanities teacher from all the way back, generations ago. But to the Mrs. McKees or Ms. McKees, the Mr. Mulligans, the Mr. Mulgrews, the Ms. Persons, and all of the educators that we represent, they are just amazing people. You, too, are amazing people. And I can't thank you enough for being on our last show this calendar year as we kind of think about and dream about and align about how we make schools better for kids and we support the people who are educators. And so I just really want to thank both of you as we one more time say happy holidays to everyone. And hopefully there's more light, as I said earlier, than darkness. And for those who want to know more about what NICET's doing, UFT's doing, AFT's doing, you can learn more about the Micron and Microsoft agreements at aft.org. And you can learn much more about our guests at NICET.org and at uft.org. And for all of our listeners, until next year, take care and thanks for listening. Thank you, Melinda. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thanks, Randy.
Happy holidays.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Union Talk. Remember to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast and tune in every other week for a new episode. Thank you, be safe, and be well.